Dr. Mchangizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about my grandmother. My grandmother passed away 2 weeks ago. Now, she died of COVID. I want to talk to you a couple of things about that. First of all, supposing that she had died of COVID, unfortunately, every year, cold viruses are what push old folks over the edge. And it's just part of life. Colds often make the last final difference that takes multiple comorbidities and finally just pushes over that last little bit. And even if it is the final cause that pushes it over the edge. But of course, in this case, it's arguable that it was COVID that caused it. It was just that she died with COVID. COVID was just one of the many reasons that she passed away. It was overdetermined. My grandmother was 100 years old. She's been strong dementia for at least 5 years, and many failing systems. So this isn't exactly a death by COVID, but it certainly was a death with COVID. However, it would never have been necessarily called a death by flu or a death by another cold, or even whiff. No one would have noted it to us had it happened on previous years. The other thing that there's a couple other morals that one can draw from this, and the other is, of course, that her old folks' home, her long-term care home, had been under extreme lockdown for the last 10 months. My mother and my aunt were able to visit her very, very rarely and under very cautious conditions. It was very difficult to see her. Multiple protective clothing that she had to wear, that my family had to wear to go visit. My mother and aunt had to in order to visit. It was practically impossible to visit. The number of visits drastically fell. Despite it being on that kind of extreme lockdown, still the virus went in, as of course it always does, because there's people that work there. There's all of the employees that work there, all of the service industry underlying it that provides all the food. All of these things have to happen for life to go on even under lockdown. It's impossible to properly lock down. The way that you would want to potentially protect them is to let all of those service workers that come in who are not at risk from COVID, in fact it's the same as any old cold like flu, potentially less if they're young, to just have gotten it a long time ago so that then they're not passing it around as much, and then they can come to work and they don't have any disease to spread. Now the other issue, the final issue that I'd like to mention, is that when you have dementia in your final stages of life, you are frightened. Every time my mom would leave or I would leave, where am I going to go now? She would ask my mother. Who's going to take care of me now? Each and every time. So obviously she's not fully there. You might say, well, yeah, she's not fully there. These experiences are less important. But in some sense, if she had been fully there, there's a sense in which she could have at least said, yes, I believe this virus is really dangerous and I'm going to stay under lockdown because it helps everybody. Or she could have had more my opinion about this, which is, this is crazy, but at least I understand what's going on and I'm here by myself, but what am I going to do? These are broad social forces I can't fight with. But instead, she's a different kind of creature at that point that doesn't know what's happening and just wants to be around family where she feels comfortable. Instead, she's rarely ever around family, and so is always frightened. So her last year of her life was in disproportionately frightened circumstances by virtue of what turned out to be useless lockdown procedures that really just, wrecked the last portions of my grandmother's and tons of folks' lives. And that was your depressing science moment.